Apex Logistics operates a massive commercial transport fleet. Overseeing that supply chain requires constant material acquisitions, a responsibility publicly held by General Manager Sarah Jenkins. Acting in her official capacity, Sarah visits a commercial auto dealership and negotiates the purchase of 5 new delivery trucks. She uses her Apex business cards, coordinates the deal through company email, and signs the $450,000 contract as general manager. But a month later, Apex Logistics refuses to honor the contract or pay for the trucks. The dealership is left with $500,000 in suspended inventory and files a lawsuit for breach of contract. Apex argues they are not legally responsible because of a strict rule in their internal corporate constitution. Sarah is only authorized to spend up to $100,000. Anything above that requires formal board approval, which she never obtained. To find out who pays, we use the agency triangle. It maps the principal, the agent, and the third party. Actual authority strictly limits the agent's internal spending to $100,000. But mathematically, Sarah's $450,000 external agreement vastly exceeds her internal permission. This discrepancy triggers a legal doctrine known as apparent authority. It is the specific mechanism the law uses to determine what happens when an agent's public actions contradict their private limitations. Courts use a standard analytical algorithm called IRAC, Issue, Rule, Application, Conclusion. The first step distills the dispute into a singular question. For Apex, the issue is, did Sarah have apparent authority to bind Apex to a $450,000 contract, despite lacking actual authority? The answer to this single question decides whether Apex Logistics absorbs a $500,000 corporate liability, or the independent dealership swallows a catastrophic loss. Before analyzing the evidence, we must establish the governing legal standard in the rule phase. The doctrine of apparent authority states that a principal is legally bound by an agent's contract if the principal's own actions made it seem like the agent had permission to sign it. Courts test for apparent authority by requiring the third party to prove 3 mandatory elements. First is manifestation. The principal must have made some public representation indicating that the agent possessed authority to act on their behalf. Second is reasonable reliance. The third party must have believed that manifestation, and that belief has to be objectively logical within their specific industry. Third is good faith alteration. The third party must have entered the contract and changed their financial position without any knowledge of the principal's internal restrictions. Notice the focus here. Actual authority looks entirely inward, checking the company's private rules. Apparent authority looks entirely outward, judging the public signals sent to the market. The law enforces this rule to facilitate smooth commercial trade. If this protection didn't exist, vendors would have to demand a formal corporate audit before selling a single box of pens or a single fleet vehicle. To win the lawsuit and force Apex to pay, the dealership must prove that all 3 of these elements exist in the case facts. This brings us to the application stage. This matrix cross-references the raw case data on the right with the strict legal rule on the left to generate an outcome. We start by testing element 1, manifestation. What outward signals did Apex Logistics give the dealership regarding Sarah's power? The primary signal is her title. Apex publicly appointed her as their general manager, a role inherently associated with operational control. Furthermore, Apex equipped her with official business cards and the corporate email infrastructure she used to negotiate the deal. Element 1 is satisfied. By giving her the title and the tools, Apex manifested Sarah's authority to the outside world. Moving to element 2, reasonable reliance. Was it logical for the auto dealership to believe a general manager could authorize a multi-vehicle purchase? In the commercial transport industry, acquiring and replacing fleet vehicles is a customary, daily duty for the person overseeing logistics. Element 2 is satisfied. Given her title and the nature of the business, the dealership's reliance was objectively reasonable. Finally, element 3, good faith. This addresses Apex's primary defense, the $100,000 internal spending cap. Courts view internal corporate constitutions through the lens of an information wall. Unless a company explicitly hands their private rulebook to a vendor, those restrictions remain invisible to external parties. The facts confirm the dealership was completely unaware of the spending cap when they signed the agreement. Element 3 is satisfied. The dealership acted in good faith because they had no factual reason to suspect a hidden limitation. The application phase is complete, and the data aligns perfectly with the rule. An agent violating a private internal limit does not legally erase the public manifestation of their authority. We arrive at the final stage of the IRAC engine, the conclusion. In legal analysis, the conclusion is not an opinion. It is the inevitable, mechanical output dictated by the application phase. The answer to our initial issue is definitive. Yes, Sarah Jenkins possessed apparent authority when she executed the truck purchase. Because she held apparent authority, Apex Logistics is entirely legally bound to the $450,000 contract, just as if the board of directors had signed it themselves. The commercial auto dealership will win their breach of contract lawsuit. Returning to the spatial map, the legal architecture is finalized. The principal is now locked directly to the third party. This highlights the underlying philosophy of risk allocation in agency law. If a company arms an employee with the title, the tools, and the appearance of power, that company must bear the financial risk if the employee goes rogue. The law requires this to ensure commercial certainty. Without apparent authority, every routine transaction would grind to a halt while vendors investigated their clients' private corporate bylaws. In the eyes of the law, public representation will always overpower private bureaucracy. As the IRAC derivation proves, a company like Apex Logistics cannot use its own internal secrets as a shield against the public market.